So, you paid 20 grand for a French luxury handbag? Well, buckle up, because what if I told you it might have actually been stitched together in a Chinese factory and then just gift wrapped in Paris? This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a countersuit that just flipped the fashion world on its overpriced head. And yes, the twist coming later in this video, it could shake the foundation of every so-called heritage brand still standing.
Some say as long as there's a tag saying made in China, the bag can never be luxury. However, in fact, more than 80% of the luxury bags in the world are made in China. But those luxury brands just won't acknowledge that. They take almost finished bags from China factories back to their own countries and just do the repackaging and logo installing. That way, the bags will appear at their boutiques as made in Italy or made in France.
It all started when Hermes, the crown jewel of elitist accessories, decided to go on the offensive. They filed a glossy, high-profile lawsuit against a group of Chinese manufacturers, claiming these factories were pushing out fake Birkins faster than they could say made in France. They framed themselves as the valiant defender of craftsmanship, tradition, and Parisian prestige. You know, the usual PR sob story. And for a moment, people actually believed them. But then the story took a hard left, because instead of rolling over, the accused manufacturers clapped back. And it wasn't just to clear their name. They dropped a legal bombshell. Hermes, they claimed, had been outsourcing production to their factories all along. Yes, those factories. The very ones Hermes tried to paint as criminal. So let's get this straight. Hermes sues Chinese factories for counterfeiting, only for those same factories to say, actually, we made your bags, you just don't want to admit it. It's like catching someone yelling, thief, while they're hiding your wallet in their pocket. Stick around, because what comes next might make you question every Made in France tag you've ever trusted. And if you think this is wild, oh, we've got more scandals where that came from. Subscribe to Chatterfuse and stay looped in on the celebrity and luxury lies that keep getting uglier by the week. And just when it seemed like the storm couldn't get any worse, this is where the real bombshell dropped.
Now, close your eyes. Let's just do a little, very easy experiment in your head, okay? Imagine that you have Hermes bag and suddenly the label on it changed from made in France into made in China, while everything else like leathers, zippers, and hardware remain the same. Do you suddenly feel that your bag is not as luxury as before? If you do, that means you have been misled and poisoned by the market campaign of those luxury brands for too long.
And just when it seemed like the storm couldn't get any worse, this is where the real bombshell dropped. The countersuit didn't just hint at shady practices, it laid them out with surgical precision. According to the Chinese manufacturers, Hermes wasn't simply dabbling in outsourcing. They were outsourcing the core of the craft, cutting, stitching, assembling, the very backbone of bag making, all allegedly done in Chinese factories. Only after the bags were nearly complete were they shipped back to France, they claim, for the finishing touches. That final polish, the logo press, the carefully tied ribbon, just enough to qualify, on paper, for that coveted Made in France stamp. Legally, it walks a fine line, but ethically, it's a marketing sleight of hand that makes a luxury customer look less like a connoisseur and more like a mark. And here's the kicker. The bags may not be fake, but the narrative around them? That's what's allegedly fraudulent. Because the entire value proposition of a Hermes bag isn't just the materials, it's the myth. The image of French artisans delicately handcrafting each piece in a sunlit Parisian atelier. But if those same bags are being machine-stitched in a Guangdong factory, then finished off in France just to qualify for the label, it's not luxury, it's logistics in disguise. What makes this allegation sting even more is how perfectly it reveals the quiet loopholes that luxury brands never want you to see. A technicality here, a packaging step there, and suddenly, the dream sells itself. But when that illusion is stripped away, what's left? A product whose real origin story was never meant to be part of the branding. And while the branding paints a picture of heritage and exclusivity, the reality behind the scenes looks far more industrial. One of the key facilities named in the countersuit? A factory in Behan City, China, operating for over 50 years, with a reputation for producing high-end goods for some of the biggest names in fashion. This isn't a back alley operation. It's a global powerhouse. In fact, reports suggest this single region manufactures up to 80% of the world's luxury handbags. And when it comes to the infamous Kelly bag, the one Hermes toos as requiring 20 hours of labor, 30 individual leather pieces, and years of artisan training, the manufacturers allege most of that work wasn't happening in France at all. Chinese laborers, many of whom have decades of skill and speed honed in high-output environments, were reportedly handling the bulk of it, from forming the base to stitching the body, even attaching the notoriously intricate handles. So while Hermes talks about tradition and time, the accusation is that what buyers are really paying for is the privilege of French packaging. And when these claims started gaining traction, Hermes didn't stay silent. They quickly rolled out a slick PR campaign, videos of pristine workshops in France, artisan hands gliding over leather, soft piano music in the background. The message? See, we make our bags right here, always have. But critics weren't convinced. The timing felt too perfect, too reactive. The countersuit argues that these glossy clips weren't about transparency, they were damage control, designed not to refute the core allegations, but to preserve the fantasy. Because in luxury, perception isn't just part of the product, it is the product. And when a brand's story is worth more than the materials it's built on, you can bet they'll do whatever it takes to keep that story alive, even if the facts say otherwise. And while Hermes doubled down on optics, consumers decided to do their own investigating. Independent buyers, some of them seasoned collectors, others just furious, began cutting open their bags. What they found wasn't exactly the holy grail of craftsmanship. Layer by layer, thread by thread, the inside of these $20,000 handbags started to resemble something a lot more ordinary. People expected artisanal precision. Instead, they found glue residue, uneven stitching, and materials that didn't scream heritage. They whispered, high-margin shortcut. Some even posted side-by-side comparisons of bags labeled Made in France and those known to be factory samples, finding little, if any, tangible difference. What made matters worse was the psychological whiplash. For years, buyers were told they weren't just buying a product, they were buying a story. Now they were realizing that story might have been engineered in a boardroom, not a workshop. And that paranoia? It didn't stop with Hermes, because once the curtain started lifting, eyes turned to the rest of the industry. Suddenly, Chanel's shoes, IKEA's high-end linens, and even luxury tableware were all being traced back to the same regions in China, the same factories, the same workers, the same silent arrangement. Produce quietly, finish visibly, sell loudly. Reports surfaced linking multiple Hermes product lines to factories also used by mainstream retail giants. Beddings, belts, loafers, products once romanticized as French or Italian craftsmanship now looked suspiciously like assembly line exports with a couture markup. And social media didn't just notice, they erupted. TikTok creators who once flaunted their bags and unboxings were now posting exposés, dissecting every tag, every seam. Luxury resale buyers demanded more rigorous authentication. And comment sections, a minefield of betrayal, sarcasm, and disbelief. The trust wasn't just fractured, it was vaporized. Because once buyers realized they'd been paying for origin stories that didn't hold up, the real value of these luxury items became dangerously unclear. And with doubt infecting even the most iconic brands, the whole industry began to look less like a temple of taste and more like a very expensive illusion. And as the story unraveled, the emotional backlash hit even harder than the legal claims. For many Hermes customers, especially those who saved, waited, or built collections over decades, this wasn't just about money, it was about identity. Owning a Birkin or a Kelly wasn't just fashion, it was status, exclusivity, and belief in a legacy that felt untouchable. Now, that legacy feels suspiciously mass-produced. Resale platforms have started to feel the shift. Items that once sold above retail, often with waitlists of their own, are now being scrutinized more harshly. Buyers are asking for production records, artisan stamps, origin verification, things they never questioned before. Because when the illusion breaks, the premium vanishes with it. And if the brand can't back up its mystique with cold, verifiable facts, those five-figure bags may soon carry four-figure value and not a cent more. But the emotional damage is only one side of the fallout. The legal consequences? That's where the stakes really multiply. The Chinese manufacturer's countersuit accuses Hermes of violating international trade laws, specifically the ones requiring transparent country of origin labeling. If a significant portion of a product is made outside the country on the label, it must be disclosed. Failing to do so isn't just misleading, it's illegal. If Hermes is found guilty of misrepresentation or fraud, the fallout could include more than just fines. We're talking multi-million-dollar penalties, class action lawsuits from angry customers, and global investigations into their entire supply chain. And worse than all of that, the irreversible erosion of their brand's credibility. Because once a luxury label becomes synonymous with deception, there's no marketing campaign big enough to reverse that stain. But this scandal doesn't stop at Hermes. It's now rippling across the entire luxury fashion ecosystem. Because when the most revered brand gets caught in a fabrication this big, every other label finds itself under a magnifying glass. Consumers are starting to reevaluate what they're actually buying when they invest in high-end fashion. Is it craftsmanship, culture, or just clever marketing stitched together with buzzwords and selective lighting? And for the industry, that's a dangerous question, because luxury, at its core, isn't just about quality, it's about belief. If people stop believing in the story, then the story stops selling. And the deeper this scandal sinks, the more personal the fallout becomes. Customers who once wore their Hermes bags like armor now feel exposed. Not just financially, but emotionally. Because they didn't just buy leather and hardware, they bought into a legacy, a story of French craftsmanship passed down through generations, a story they now suspect may have been fabricated for profit. Some collectors are quietly offloading their pieces. Others are watching resale values stall or plummet. Auction houses have started to revise authentication processes, not just for condition, but for origin. Because the very idea of a true Hermès bag is no longer about owning the right item. It's about proving it was ever real in the first place. And while customers mourn their myth, Hermès now faces a legal reckoning that could outlast the media storm. The manufacturer's countersuit doesn't just accuse them of exaggeration, it claims outright fraud. Specifically, violating international trade laws that require brands to accurately disclose where a product is made. If a bag is mostly crafted in one country, but labeled as made in another, that's not clever marketing, that's mislabeling. And in legal terms, that's playing with fire. Should a court find Hermes guilty, the consequences won't be limited to a PR black eye. We're talking massive fines, global import restrictions, and class action lawsuits from consumers who feel deliberately misled. The brand could also be forced to retroactively disclose product origins, something luxury houses have fought against for decades. And more than any fine, the real cost could be reputation. Because once a company loses the trust that justifies its prices, its entire business model starts to unravel. You can redesign ads, you can open new boutiques, but you can't rebrand your way out of betrayal. And in the end, this was never just about one brand's dirty laundry. This is about pulling the silk curtain back on an entire industry built on the illusion of rarity, heritage, and handcrafted perfection. Hermes just happened to be the first domino to tip. But make no mistake, the tremors are already spreading. Because if the gold standard of luxury is allegedly stitched together offshore and labeled as French fantasy, then what is luxury anymore? A feeling? A facade? A well-lit lie sold at $20,000 a pop? As this lawsuit winds through the courts and the public continues to dig deeper, one thing is becoming painfully clear. We may be witnessing the end of blind brand worship and the beginning of a new era where transparency matters more than tradition. For decades, consumers paid for stories, romantic, exclusive, hand-stitched stories. But now they're demanding receipts, not romance. And that quiet shift, it just might reshape the future of fashion as we know it. Because when even the elites get caught playing pretend, you start to wonder, was luxury ever about quality? Or just convincing you it was? If you found this breakdown eye-opening, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scandal. At Chatterfuse, we don't just spill the tea, we light the match.
to now be faced with the bombshell allegation that portions of their prized possessions might not even be French at all. It's a gut punch to everything Hermes has built its empire on: heritage, authenticity, and the mystique of Parisian artisans. The countersuit claims that Hermes' actions amount to nothing short of consumer fraud, painting a picture of a brand that capitalized on romanticized French imagery while secretly benefiting from cheaper offshore labor. If proven true, it doesn't just undermine Hermes' reputation, it calls into question the very foundation of the modern luxury industry. Because if Hermes, the gold standard of exclusivity, allegedly cut corners and misled customers, who's really safe? The stakes couldn't be higher. For Hermes, this isn't just about winning a lawsuit anymore, it's about preserving the illusion that justifies their sky-high price tags. And for consumers, it's about discovering that the dream they were sold might have been nothing more than a carefully packaged lie. The conflict exploded into public view when Hermes initially took the offensive, filing a high-profile lawsuit against a group of Chinese manufacturers. Their accusation that these manufacturers were flooding the market with counterfeit versions of the holy grail of luxury handbags, the Birkin. Hermes claimed these fakes threatened not just their brand's image, but the entire mystique that surrounds a product many people wait years on a list to even be considered for. They painted themselves as the noble protector of artistry, craftsmanship, and exclusivity. And for a moment, it looked like Hermes would be the clear victim, rallying public sympathy behind them. But then, the manufacturers hit back and hit hard. In a move nobody saw coming, the accused manufacturers didn't just deny the counterfeit claims. They went nuclear, filing a countersuit that flipped the entire narrative on its head. Their retaliation wasn't just about clearing their names, it was about exposing what they allege is a much bigger fraud. According to them, Hermes has been quietly outsourcing significant portions of its production to Chinese factories for years, while still boldly marketing its products as painstakingly handmade in France. They argue that while Hermes was publicly condemning Chinese manufacturing, they were privately relying on it. These manufacturers claim Hermes used Chinese labor for critical parts of bag production, including stitching, cutting, and assembling, only to ship the bags back to France for finishing touches and that coveted Made in France label. The retaliation landed like a bombshell. Suddenly, Hermes wasn't just fighting off counterfeiters. They were fighting allegations that they were no different from the very people they were accusing, profiting off of the same supply chains they claimed to despise. Worse, they were allegedly passing off outsourced labor as artisanal European craftsmanship to an audience willing to pay tens of thousands for the privilege. It wasn't just a legal defense, it was a full-scale character assassination of Hermes' most sacred promise, authenticity. According to the explosive countersuit, Hermes' alleged deception doesn't just amount to a simple marketing fib, it strikes at the very core of international commerce. The manufacturers argue that Hermes' entire branding strategy hinges on one critical lie, that their products are born and raised in France, lovingly crafted by elite artisans. But in reality, they allege these iconic bags are often assembled, stitched, and even partially manufactured thousands of miles away in Chinese factories. Far from the cobblestone streets of Paris, the brand loves to romanticize. This, they claim, isn't just a betrayal of customer trust. It's a blatant violation of international trade laws designed to protect fair competition and honest business practices. Countries across the world have strict labeling regulations, rules that say if a significant portion of a product's manufacturing happens outside the country on the label, you must disclose it. Allegedly, Hermes knowingly skirted these rules, allowing them to slap a Made in France tag onto bags that were, at least in part, made elsewhere. And here's why it matters. The entire value of a Hermes bag lies not just in the leather or the stitches, it's the story. The dream that your Birkin was touched only by the most skilled French artisans, crafted in a historic atelier, steeped in centuries of tradition. That dream is what justifies the $20,000 price tag. Without it, without the romance, it's just another luxury bag, no more authentic than anything else on a crowded shelf. By allegedly hiding the true origins of their bags, Hermes didn't just mislead buyers, they obliterated the level playing field. Competing brands who might have been more honest about outsourcing couldn't match Hermes's mythical 100% French craftsmanship narrative. The manufacturers argue that Hermes gained an unfair competitive advantage by selling a fantasy at full price, while cutting costs behind the scenes. It's a brutal accusation. If proven true, Hermes could be guilty of not just misleading millions of customers, but of fundamentally altering the luxury market by building a global empire on what these manufacturers now call a carefully constructed illusion. This legal battle didn't just rattle Hermes, it shattered the illusion the entire luxury market depends on. Overnight, whispers turned into roars as both consumers and industry insiders were forced to confront an uncomfortable question. How much of luxury is real, and how much is just smoke and mirrors? The countersuit against Hermes cracked open, a vault of suspicion that had been quietly brewing for years. If the most prestigious brand, the one hailed as the last guardian of true craftsmanship, was allegedly bending the truth about its products, what did that say about the rest of the luxury world? Suddenly, everything from Louis Vuitton trunks to Chanel suits was viewed with a side eye. Was it all just strategic marketing dressed up as tradition? Consumers who once felt a sense of pride carrying a Birkin now felt something else creeping in: doubt. The very foundation of what made these products desirable, the trust, the heritage, the exclusivity, was under siege. Forums exploded with outrage. TikTok creators who flaunted their bags were now making videos wondering if they had been scammed. Even luxury resale sites started quietly reassessing how they authenticated the origin stories of the goods they sold. And the risk for Hermes? Catastrophic. If a court rules that Hermes intentionally misrepresented the origin of its products, the brand won't just face minor fines or a slap on the wrist. They could be staring down massive financial penalties, a tidal wave of class action, lawsuits, and, worse than all of that, the total implosion of their brand's reputation. Hermes isn't just selling leather and thread. They're selling a myth, a centuries-old narrative of French mastery, artistry, and privilege. If that myth dies, so does the justification for charging $20,000 for a handbag that may have roots far from French soil. The fallout could be brutal: plunging sales, plummeting stock prices, global boycotts, and the permanent stain of scandal that no amount of rebranding could ever erase. And it wouldn't stop with Hermes, because if one luxury titan falls, it sets a terrifying precedent. Other brands with murky manufacturing practices could suddenly find themselves dragged into the light, forced to disclose exactly how luxurious their supply chains really are. The entire industry, built on a shimmering illusion of perfection, could come crashing down like a house of cards. Public reaction has been swift and critical. Many consumers feel betrayed by the possibility that their expensive purchases may not be as authentically French as advertised. Industry experts are also weighing in, debating the ethical implications of outsourcing production while maintaining a facade of exclusive craftsmanship. Legally, the case hinges on whether Hermes's labeling practices constitute fraud and whether the company has intentionally deceived consumers about the origins of its products. The outcome could have far-reaching consequences, potentially leading to stricter regulations on product labeling and greater transparency requirements for luxury brands. Beyond the courtroom, this lawsuit challenges the very notion of authenticity in the luxury fashion industry. If a brand as prestigious as Hermes is found to have misrepresented its products, it could erode consumer trust and prompt a reevaluation of what constitutes genuine luxury. In conclusion, the countersuit filed by Chinese manufacturers against Hermes not only exposes potential inconsistencies in the brand's practices, but also ignites a broader conversation about transparency and authenticity in the luxury market. As the legal proceedings unfold, the fashion world watches closely, aware that the outcome may redefine standards and expectations for luxury goods worldwide.